All right there, everyone. President Donald Trump comes out unscathed by the media's blitzkrieg of negative coverage. That's what we'll be talking about on today's video. Again, a quick reminder that you can get my book, Classical versus Modern Education, for just 99 cents as part of our back-to-school discount. You can get it either as an ebook download or on Kindle at the links I'll provide for you below. The book is normally $7.95, but now you can get a great overview of the kind of conservative reforms that are being implemented in education all over the world for just 99 cents. So I'll provide the links for you below the video. As the smoke clears from the utter bombardment of the media's blitzkrieg against President Donald Trump all last week, following, of course, the Cohen guilty plea and the Manafort guilty verdicts, a bombardment that included MSNBC using the term impeachment some 200 times in a matter of a single day. All the mainstream media outlets 24/7 pouncing on Trump. He was finally crashing and burning. His presidency was on the brink. It's only a matter of time before he implodes. As the smoke clears from all of that 5-day assault, constant assault, we can now assess the damage to our president by the alliance of mainstream media outlets who deliberately sought to oust our president as part of what journalist Barry Castleman calls the media's attempted coup d'etat. The latest polls are all in, and are you ready for the damage assessment? Are you sitting down? Dick Morris has done us all a favor in averaging out the 5 polls that have been conducted since the Manafort conviction and the Cohen guilty plea and the subsequent blitzkrieg from the mainstream media. And those polls show Trump at 44.5% approval. 45%. Now, what Morris does is he compares the average of those 5 polls with the average of 4 polls that came out just before the media blitzkrieg. And do you know what the average approval rating for Trump was with those 4 polls? He averaged 42% job approval. In other words, before the media onslaught, Trump was at 42% approval. After the media onslaught, he was at 44.5% approval. According to these polls, Donald Trump's approval rating actually went up 2 to 3 points in the midst of that full-scale media assault. The smoke has cleared and his approval rating has actually increased. You just got to let that hit you. I don't know if you saw that shock of Chuck Todd on Meet the Press the other day. He wanted to know how badly Michael Cohen's guilty plea and Paul Manafort's convictions damaged President Trump's approval ratings, right? And he even went so far as to say something to the effect that the plea bargain and the convictions may have been just too much for even diehard Trump supporters to bear. And then, to his astonishment, he featured 2 polls, both conducted by the Wall Street Journal and NBC. In the first Wall Street Journal NBC poll, taken just before news about Cohen and Manafort broke and the media assault, Trump's approval was at 46%. The second poll, again a Wall Street Journal NBC poll, was taken between August 22nd and 25th, which are the days after the news broke of the guilty plea and conviction in the media onslaught and the like. And it showed Trump's approval at 44%, which is well within the margin of error of the first survey. In other words, according to the Wall Street Journal NBC polls, the mass bombardment of negative media coverage over the course of 4 days while the poll was being conducted, Trump's approval rating didn't drop in the least. Not only that, you ready for this? Not only did Trump's approval not get damaged, but actually went up a few percentage points if we average the polls out. Not only that, but here's the icing on the cake. Trump's approval ratings are actually higher right now than Obama's were at the same time in his presidency. Rasmussen right now has Trump at 46% approval. At this same time in his presidency, Obama was at 44%. Now keep in mind the radical discrepancy in media coverage between these 2 presidents. Obama received 24/7 accolades from the mainstream media, and yet Trump polls even higher. So what on earth is going on? I think there are two dynamics that are interfacing here that I think goes a long way to understanding what's going on, both from the vantage point of the media and also from the vantage point of Trump's approval. So let's start with the media. What we have to understand is that cultural anthropologists that study media and media-based communication and culture, these anthropologists have long recognized a process known as selectivity when it comes to what's actually presented as news and entertainment. In other words, and I think we all know this, we sense it intuitively, but it's good to know that scholarship has at least corroborated that intuition. The media simply doesn't depict the world around us as it is, in a simplistic and objective fashion. I do think that many in the mainstream media think they do that. They really do naively believe that there is an independent reality out there that exists that can then in turn be mediated by them to you in a completely uncontaminated manner. I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt that they actually believe that. The problem for them, as anthropologists of media like Mark Allen Peterson and others have observed, the problem for them is that this process of selectivity, this process of picking and choosing what constitutes news and what it means, is anything but neutral or objective. To assume that one is merely mediating reality for the viewer simply overlooks the whole notion of whose reality, whose perspective, whose experience of the world is going to count as the empirical reality against which to evaluate other accounts, right? In other words, it's not so much a matter of whether events are happening all around us. It's a matter of articulating those events, of constructing an account of those things. And that account of what's happening in the world is always, always, always constructed by the reporter. Always. There's a radical difference between the terms freedom fighters and rebel separatists, right? There's a radical difference between the term undocumented worker and illegal immigrant, okay? There's a world of difference. And so when you look at the vocabulary of the mainstream media and its concepts and its symbols of representation, it is clear that they are operating from a thoroughly transnational, transcultural, globalist perspective. And Donald Trump is probably the single greatest existential threat to the globalist perspective on the world stage today. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, who as far as the media are concerned are de facto enemies number 1 and number 2 respectively. So the mainstream media really does see President Trump as an existential threat to our democracy. He is unfit to be president. He must be removed from office. And they select and interpret the day's events in accordance with that perception of the world. That is what constitutes mainstream media news today. And it goes a long way in explaining why it is that all the mainstream media outlets can present a rather monolithic account of Trump as doomed, as falling apart, as criminal, as collapsing, as guilty, and the like. It's not because these events actually exist, but rather because of the perspective of reality shared by those who select what does and what does not constitute as a newsworthy event. So I think that's the first thing we need to get our heads around. Why there was a blitzkrieg in the first place and the astonishment that it didn't work in terms of denting his approval ratings, which of course then leads us to the second dynamic operative here. There is a second thing. And we talked about this in one of our last videos, and it's something that I don't think that the media quite understands. I don't think they understand this in the least. There is nothing, simply nothing that President Donald Trump can do that could even come close to provoking the kind of disgust and moral outrage that tens of millions of people feel towards the Washington establishment. I'm going to say that again because I think it's key. There is nothing, absolutely nothing, that President Donald Trump can do that can even come close to provoking the kind of disgust and moral outrage that tens of millions of people feel towards the Washington establishment. There's nothing he can do that can even compare to it, that would even come close to the... I mentioned in another video, the pollster Scott Rasmussen wrote about this in his 2010 book, Mad as Hell. He found substantial data that showed that there was, in fact, a major paradigm shift taking place back then among the American electorate. And, of course, here on this channel, we would argue among the world electorate, where the old political divides between left and right and liberal versus conservative were collapsing. They were dying away, and a new political divide between the people versus the ruling class, the populace versus the political, economic, and media elite. That was the new political divide that was opening up. And Donald Trump, more than any other presidential candidate, recognized that divide and is its emblematic champion. And this is what the media selectivity simply can't see. This is why he wasn't damaged. As the champion of nationalism, populism, and traditionalism, there is nothing that he can do that can come even close to provoking the kind of resentment and anger and moral disgust and outrage that tens of millions of people have towards the swamp, the deep state, the establishment, which includes the mainstream media. So, my friends, we have entered into a new period, one in which the influence held so strongly by the mainstream press has largely vanished. We are witnessing a nationalist populist president taking on perhaps the single most massive barrage of negative press ever experienced by a national leader. And each time the smoke clears, he stands there untouched, unharmed, unfazed, and ready to strike back. Don't forget to click on our link below and get your copy of my book, Classical versus Modern Education, for only 99 cents for a limited time. And as always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Click on our Patreon link below. Become a monthly supporter of this channel and help us to continue to analyze current events in light of awesome conservative trends so that you can personally and professionally flourish. God bless.